In a quiet village nestled in the rolling hills of the countryside, there lived a humble farmer named John and his devoted wife, Maria. They lived a simple life, filled with hard work and love, though they had no children of their own. Their home was small, with a thatched roof and a small garden that provided them with enough to eat. Each day, they worked together in their fields, tending to the crops and caring for their animals. They were not rich, but they found joy in the little things, the quiet mornings, the peaceful evenings, and, most of all, in the company of each other. The couple had no children of their own, but Maria had always dreamed of being a mother. She had longed for the day she could hold a child of her own, watch them grow up, and pass on the wisdom of generations. But after years of trying, they had come to accept that their lives would be childless. Still, they had each other, and that was enough. One warm, golden morning, as John was ploughing the field, something strange happened. His plough struck an object, something soft and unusual that he hadn't encountered before. Surprised, he stopped the plough and knelt, his hands brushing away the dirt to uncover what lay hidden beneath. Wrapped tightly in cloth, John saw a tiny bundle. His heart raced as he carefully unwrapped it, revealing a newborn baby. The infant was still alive, its tiny chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. "Maria," John called out, his voice trembling with disbelief. "Come quickly." Maria, who had been working nearby, rushed over, her apron fluttering in the wind. She gasped when she saw the baby in John's arms. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Who would leave a child here, in the middle of the field?" John looked around, but the field was empty. There were no other people in sight, and the sun was beginning to rise over the horizon. The baby had been abandoned, left for them to find, and they knew they couldn't just leave it. "We have to take him in," Maria said, her voice soft but firm. "We can't leave him out here alone." Without hesitation, the couple wrapped the baby carefully in Maria's shawl and hurried home. They cleaned him, fed him, and took turns watching over him. Over time, the baby grew stronger, and soon the couple couldn't imagine their lives without him. They named him Rog, and though they had not given birth to him, they loved him as their own. The first few years of Rog's life were filled with laughter and happiness. He grew quickly, as most children do, and his inquisitive eyes were always exploring the world around him. John and Maria taught him the ways of the farm, how to plant seeds, how to milk the cows, and how to mend the fences. As the days turned 2 years, Rog became the heart of their home. The villagers, though curious about Rog's origins, quickly grew to love him. He was kind-hearted, always helping the elderly with their chores, and his smile could brighten the darkest of days. Maria often looked at him with pride, her heart swelling with love for the boy she had raised. But as Rog grew older, things began to change. Around the time he reached his teenage years, he started pulling away from his parents. He spent more and more time in the nearby town, often not returning home until late in the evening. At first, John and Maria didn't think much of it. He was becoming independent, as all young people do. But as the months passed, his absences became longer, and his attitude began to shift. He became distant and irritable, responding to their concerns with sharp retorts. One evening, after not seeing Raj for several days, Maria sat at the dinner table, waiting for him. The quiet of the house was unsettling, and John couldn't hide the worry in his eyes. The sun had long set, and the shadows in the room seemed to stretch as if mirroring their unease. At last, Raj walked through the door, his face dark and distant. "Raj," Maria said gently, her voice filled with concern. "Where have you been? We've been worried." "Why are you so late?" Raj barely glanced at his mother, his face hard and unyielding. "I'm fine," he muttered, sitting down at the table without offering any explanation. John exchanged a concerned glance with Maria. "Son, we've noticed you've been spending a lot of time in the city. Are you making good choices out there? The city can be dangerous. We want you to be safe." Raj shot his father an angry look. "I can take care of myself, Dad. Stop treating me like a child." Maria's heart sank, but she tried to keep her voice calm. "We just want what's best for you, Raj. We've always wanted you to be happy and safe." But Raj wasn't listening. His once bright and kind eyes were now filled with something darker. He had changed, and neither John nor Maria knew how to reach him anymore. In the following weeks, Raj's behavior grew more erratic. He began demanding more money and more possessions, things they couldn't afford. He would spend hours locked in his room, only to come out with an air of arrogance and impatience. His pride, once humble, now seemed swollen, and his kindness, which had once defined him, was replaced with cold indifference. Then one night, things took a dramatic turn. Raj came home late, and the tension in the house was palpable. Maria and John had been waiting for him, sitting at the kitchen table in the dim light of an oil lamp. The house was quiet to quiet. They had not heard Raj's footsteps on the path, and when the door creaked open, it seemed louder than usual. "Raj," John said, his voice steady, but with a hint of concern. "We need to talk. You've been distant lately, and we're worried. You're asking for more money than we can give. What's going on? Why are you changing so much?" Raj's eyes flared, a storm of emotion clouding his face. "I need 1 lakh, he yelled, slamming his fist onto the table. "And I need them now." Maria's heart pounded in her chest. "Raj, what do you need so much money for?" she asked, her voice shaking. "We can't give you that much. Please, tell us what's going on." Raj's face twisted with fury. "You never gave me enough. All I ever wanted was more. You're old and poor. I'm sick of this place." His voice grew louder with each word, filled with venom. "I deserve better than this life. I deserve to be free, to live the way I want, not like this." John stood up slowly, trying to keep his voice calm. "Raj, we've worked hard for everything we have. We've given you everything we could, but we can't give you more." Please understand." But Rog wasn't listening anymore. He was consumed by his rage, the anger from years of unspoken frustrations pouring out of him like a flood. "You don't get it," he screamed. "I'm not a child anymore. I don't need you to hold my hand. I deserve more than what you've given me." Without warning, he grabbed a heavy wooden rolling pin from the nearby shelf and struck Maria across the head. The blow was hard and swift, and Maria collapsed to the floor, unconscious and bleeding. John rushed to her side, his heart racing in panic. "Maria!" he cried, but before he could do anything, Rog struck him too, hitting him with brutal force. John fell to the ground, his body limp beside his wife. Rog stood over them, his chest heaving. For a long moment, he just stared at the destruction he had caused. He had killed the people who had loved him unconditionally and who had raised him with tenderness and care. In the heat of his anger, he had crossed a line he could never come back from. Fear gripped him, and without thinking, Rog ran from the house, fleeing into the night. The moon was high in the sky as he stumbled through the fields, his heart pounding in his chest. What had he done? Days passed, and the villagers began to notice that the farm was unusually quiet. Mr. Patel, a neighbor who often visited, hadn't seen John or Maria for several days. Growing concerned, he decided to check on them. When he entered their home, he was horrified by what he saw. John and Maria were lying on the floor, their lifeless bodies covered in blood. Mr. Patel immediately ran to the village to alert the authorities. Soon, the police arrived, and after investigating the scene, they quickly realized that Rog had been responsible. They found evidence of a violent struggle, and witnesses reported seeing Rog acting strangely in the days leading up to the murder. The police tracked Rog down to the city, where he had been hiding. They arrested him, and as the truth came to light, the village was left in shock. The boy they had all loved, the boy who had once been their pride, was now a murderer. Rog was taken into custody, and as the weight of his actions sank in, he was consumed by guilt. He couldn't believe what he had done. He had killed the very people who had given him everything, who had loved him beyond measure. The loss was too much to bear. The village mourned the loss of John and Maria, and their tragic story became a lesson to all that love, no matter how pure, could sometimes be destroyed by the darkest of emotions. The farmer and his wife, who had given so much of their love and care, were taken from the world too soon. The boy they had raised, the boy they had hoped would carry on their legacy, was the one who destroyed it. The days after the death of John and Maria were somber in the village. The once lively and peaceful farm now stood silent, the fields untouched and overgrown, a stark contrast to the lively farm work that used to fill the air with the sounds of labor and love. The neighboring farmers, who had often shared meals and stories with John and Maria, could not believe what had happened. The couple, who had always opened their doors to anyone in need, had been killed by the very son they had raised with such care and devotion. The news spread quickly through the village, and a cloud of sorrow hung over the entire community. But even in their grief, the villagers couldn't stop asking the same question. Why did Raj do it? Why did the boy, whom they had all watched grow into a strong, capable young man, turn against the very people who had loved him without hesitation? As the days passed, Rod's heart ached with the weight of his guilt, and every step he took felt heavier than the last. One night, as he walked through the dimly lit streets, he found himself outside a church. The door was slightly ajar, and the faint sound of a bell echoed in the distance. Raj, lost and desperate, walked inside. The warmth and quiet of the church contrasted sharply with the cold turmoil inside him. He took a seat near the altar, his face buried in his hands as tears welled up in his eyes. "What have I done?" The question echoed in his mind over and over. He had killed the people who had given him everything: love, a home, and a future. They had cared for him, raised him as their own, and in return, he had repaid them with violence. He had thrown away everything they had worked for, everything they had hoped for. His parents, who had dreamed of seeing him live a happy life, were now gone. As the church bell tolled, Rod's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching. A priest appeared, his face kind and understanding. Without a word, he sat beside Raj, offering him a moment of solace. Raj looked up, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've done something terrible. I've hurt the people who loved me, and I don't know how to fix it." The priest nodded gently, his eyes full of empathy. "Sometimes, son, the hardest thing is facing our own mistakes. But running away from them will not bring you peace. The first step toward redemption is acknowledging the wrong you've done and seeking forgiveness." Raj nodded, but he didn't feel ready for forgiveness. How could he ask for it? How could he even begin to make amends for the horrible thing he had done? Meanwhile, back in the village, the authorities were working tirelessly to locate Raj. They interviewed neighbors, sifted through the evidence at the crime scene, and even followed up on reports from the city. Days turned into weeks, but there was still no sign of him. Rumors began to spread, with some claiming that Raj had run off to another country, while others believed he had taken his own life in his guilt. But despite all the theories, no one knew for certain where Raj was. Then, one day, a letter arrived at the police station. The envelope was plain, with no return address, but the writing inside was unmistakable. It was from Raj. The letter read, "To the people of the village, I am sorry. I am so sorry for what I've done. I can never take back the pain I've caused, the lives I've destroyed. I ran away because I couldn't face what I had done, but now I realize I must face it. I will return, and when I do, I will accept whatever punishment you deem fit. I cannot ask for forgiveness, but I hope someday you can understand that the person who did this is not the person I wanted to be. I am broken, and I have no excuse, Raj." The letter sent shockwaves through the village. It confirmed that Rog was still alive, but it also revealed the depth of his remorse. No one had expected such a letter. It gave the villagers a glimpse into Rog's tortured soul, the boy who had been lost not just to his actions, but to his own pain and confusion. As the letter circulated, whispers began to spread. Some felt sympathy for Rog, understanding that his anger had been a cry for something deeper, something the boy himself had never understood. Others, however, were filled with rage, their anger at Rog's actions still raw. The wounds left by the murders of John and Maria was still fresh, and many in the village felt that Rog deserved no mercy. When Rog finally returned to the village, he was a different person. His face was gaunt, his clothes ragged, and his eyes hollow with regret. He had spent weeks wandering, fighting with his demons, trying to come to terms with what he had done. He had not expected mercy from the villagers, but he had hoped that, in time, they would see the truth that he was not the monster he had become. When he arrived at the farm, he stood outside the house, staring at the place where so many memories had been made. The house was empty now, and the once strong walls of the farmhouse felt hollow. He stepped inside, his footsteps echoing in the silence. There were no more sounds of laughter, no more warmth, just cold, empty rooms. In the village square, the villagers gathered, whispering amongst themselves. The police had arrived, ready to take Rog into custody, but something unexpected happened. As Rog approached the crowd, an elderly woman named Mrs. Desai stepped forward. She was the widow of a man who had worked alongside John for many years. Her voice, though old and frail, carried the weight of years of wisdom. "Rog," she said softly, "you have taken the lives of those who loved you. But I believe in the power of redemption. I believe that what you did was wrong, but I also believe that you can change. The village will never forget what you did, but perhaps it's time to stop running and start healing." Rog looked up at her, his heart heavy. He didn't deserve forgiveness, but for the first time, he felt the faintest glimmer of hope. Maybe there was a way forward, not to erase his past, but to learn from it, to make amends, and perhaps, in time, to find some measure of peace. The police took Rog into custody, but the villagers' decision to let him face his consequences in his own time gave him a chance to make things right. Rog knew it would be a long, painful journey, but it was the only one he could take. He had lost everything, but maybe, just maybe, he could begin to rebuild. The tragic tale of the farmer and his wife remained in the hearts of the villagers.